I had no idea that asking one simple question would completely change my life. It was 10 at night, and I was lost in the maze of downtown streets that looked terrifying even during daylight hours. At night they felt like a graveyard. My phone was dead, Google Maps had abandoned me at the worst possible moment, and my company had given me this last-minute delivery assignment like I was some kind of superhero who could navigate unfamiliar territory blindfolded. Being an Omega didn't make me weak, but the truth was that right now I needed help. From anyone. That's when I saw him, standing tall in a black suit, his face carrying an expression that suggested the entire world existed beneath his feet. 4 men surrounded him, all clearly bodyguards, but he stood in the center like everyone else was just background decoration. His presence was so commanding that even the air seemed to hold its breath. But I was desperate, and in that moment, my desperation overpowered my common sense. "Excuse me," I called out, adjusting the strap of my delivery bag. "Do you know where Elm Street is?" He turned toward me slowly, deliberately. His eyes were deep and sharp, like a predator sizing up potential prey, and they seemed to pierce straight through to my soul. Then came the wave of alpha pheromones, so sharp and intense that my heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just any ordinary alpha. This was the kind of alpha that Omegas warned their siblings about in hushed, fearful whispers. "You lost, Omega." His voice was so low it sent electricity down my spine. That's when understanding crashed over me like ice water. I had messed up. Badly. "I just need directions," I managed to say, taking a step backward. But his gaze pinned me in place like I was glued to the ground. "Directions," he repeated with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It looked calculated, dangerous. "Do you know whose territory this is?" My stomach dropped. "No, Luca Harlow's." He said his own name as casually as someone might discuss the weather. "And you just walked right up to me and started asking questions. So you'll get your directions, but leaving won't be quite as simple." My heartbeat stuttered to a halt. I had thought this night was difficult because I'd made a wrong turn. Now it seemed I'd made the worst wrong turn of my entire life. The way he looked at me made my skin prickle with awareness. There was something calculating in his expression, like he was already 3 steps ahead of whatever I might do next. His bodyguards shifted slightly, creating a subtle barrier between me and any potential escape route. I noticed small details I'd missed before: the expensive watch on his wrist, the way his suit was tailored perfectly to his frame, the scar barely visible along his jawline that suggested violence was no stranger to him. "Look, I really don't want any trouble," I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "I'm just trying to do my job and get home." "Your job," he mused, taking a step closer. The scent of cedar wood and something darker, something that screamed danger, intensified. "Brings you into my streets at night, alone. That seems like poor decision-making to me." "It wasn't my decision," I shot back, immediately regretting the defensive tone. "My boss assigned this route." "Then your boss is either incredibly stupid or doesn't care much about your safety." His head tilted slightly, studying me with an intensity that made me want to disappear. "Which is it?" "Both, probably," I muttered. One of his bodyguards made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Luca's eyes flickered toward the man, and silence fell immediately. The power dynamic was crystal clear. These weren't just employees, they were people who understood that disappointing him had consequences. "What's your name?" he asked, returning his attention to me. "Does it matter?" The question came out before I could stop it. His smile widened, showing teeth. "It does now." Something about the way he said it made my Omega instincts flare up in warning. This wasn't just curiosity. This was a claim being staked, territory being marked. I could feel it in my bones, in the way my body wanted to respond to his presence despite my mind screaming at me to run. "Oliver," I finally answered. "Oliver Kane." "Oliver Kane," he repeated, as if tasting my name on his tongue. "Well, Oliver, it seems we have a situation. You've wandered into my territory, approached me directly, and now you know my face. These aren't things I can just ignore." "I didn't know," I protested. "I swear I had no idea who you were or where I was. I'm just trying to deliver some packages and go home to my apartment where I can forget this entire disaster of a night." "Ignorance doesn't erase the problem," he said, but there was something almost amused in his tone now. "Though I'll admit, your honesty is refreshing. Most people would be lying through their teeth right now, trying to convince me they were someone important or connected." "I'm nobody," I said flatly. "Literally nobody. I work for a delivery service that pays minimum wage and treats its employees like disposable assets. There's nothing special or important about me." Don't sell yourself short. His gaze raked over me again, and I felt exposed, despite being fully clothed. You had the courage to approach a group of dangerous-looking men in the middle of a bad neighborhood at night. That takes either bravery or stupidity. You already established it was stupidity, I reminded him. This time he actually laughed, a low sound that rumbled from his chest. Fair enough. The tension in the air shifted slightly, became less suffocating. His bodyguards seemed to relax marginally, though they never stopped being alert. I realized that whatever test I'd been undergoing, I might have passed it, or at least not failed catastrophically. Here's what's going to happen, Lucas said, his tone becoming businesslike. I'm going to have one of my men escort you to Elm Street. You'll make your delivery. Then you'll go home and you won't take any more assignments in this part of town. Understood? I nodded quickly. Understood. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said, a strange expression crossing his face. Because this isn't over, Oliver Kane. Not by a long shot. Before I could ask what he meant, he gestured to one of his bodyguards, who approached with a phone in hand. The man spoke briefly to someone, then nodded to Luca. Your escort is arranged, Luca told me. Walk 3 blocks north. There will be a car waiting. You're not coming? The question surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise him. Would you like me to? He asked, raising an eyebrow. No, I said quickly. Too quickly. I just thought, you thought wrong. But he was smiling again, that dangerous smile that made my pulse race. Go, Oliver, before I change my mind about letting you leave at all. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and started walking, feeling his eyes on my back the entire time. 3 blocks north, just as promised, a black sedan was waiting with its engine running. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a woman in her 30s with sharp features and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. Oliver Kane? She asked. That's me, I confirmed, still slightly out of breath from walking faster than necessary. Get in. I slid into the back seat and she pulled away from the curb smoothly. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Nothing like the usual rideshare vehicles I occasionally splurged on. This was luxury, the kind that reminded me exactly how far out of my depth I was. I'm supposed to take you to Elm Street, she said, eyes on the road, then home. Boss's orders. Your boss being Luca Harlow, I said, testing the name out loud. You catch on quick. There was approval in her voice. That's good. Means you might actually survive. Survive what? Exactly, I asked, my anxiety spiking again. She glanced at me in the rearview mirror. This city, his world. Take your pick. We drove in silence for a few minutes. I watched the streets pass by, noting how the neighborhood gradually shifted from threatening to merely sketchy. The delivery address was for a small apartment building, and I completed the drop-off in record time, half expecting someone to jump out and complicate my night further. When I returned to the car, the driver had stepped out and was leaning against the hood, smoking a cigarette. That was fast, she observed. I'm motivated to get home, I admitted. Smart. She crushed the cigarette beneath her heel. But before I take you there, you need to understand something. The boss doesn't just help random omegas out of the goodness of his heart. He's interested in you. My stomach twisted. Interested how? If I knew that, I'd be a lot richer than I am. She opened the driver's door. But here's free advice. Don't try to run from Luca Harlow. People who run from him either end up caught or end up dead. Sometimes both. The drive to my apartment was quiet, but her words echoed in my head. When we pulled up to my building, she handed me a business card with nothing but a phone number printed on it. He'll call, she said. When he does, answer. I took the card with trembling fingers and got out of the car. She drove away without another word, leaving me standing on the sidewalk feeling like I'd just survived something I didn't fully understand. Inside my apartment, I found my roommate Eliam sprawled on the couch, watching some reality show with excessive enthusiasm. He was a beta with an infectious personality and an unfortunate addiction to gossip. You're late, he said without looking away from the screen. How was the delivery run from hell? You have no idea, I muttered, dropping my bag by the door. That got his attention. He muted the television and sat up, studying me with concern. What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, I said, collapsing into the armchair. I think I accidentally met the Mafia. Eliam's eyes went wide. Explain. Now. So I told him everything, getting lost, approaching Luca, the strange conversation, the escort home. With each detail, Eliam's expression grew more alarmed. Oliver, he said when I finished. Do you know who Luca Harlow is? Apparently someone important? Important? Ilium laughed, but it sounded panicked. He's the underground king of the East Side. Drugs, weapons, information, if it's illegal and profitable, he controls it. The police are scared of him. Politicians take his money and look the other way. He's not just dangerous, he's untouchable. My mouth went dry. Oh, that's all you have to say? Ilium stood up, pacing. Oliver, people who get involved with him don't come back the same. Some don't come back at all. I'm not involved with him, I protested. I just asked for directions. And he had you escorted home safely instead of making you disappear. That means something. Ilium stopped pacing and looked at me seriously. He's interested, and when someone like Luca Harlow gets interested in an Omega, it's not a good thing. What are you saying? I'm saying be careful. Don't answer if he calls. Don't go anywhere near the East Side again. Pretend tonight never happened. I nodded, but even as I did, I knew it was too late for that. Something had shifted tonight. Some invisible line had been crossed. The business card in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. The next morning, I called in sick to work. My boss was annoyed but accepted it, after I explained I'd been shaken up by some aggressive people in the neighborhood during last night's delivery. It wasn't entirely a lie. I spent the day trying to distract myself with mundane tasks. Cleaning the apartment, catching up on shows, anything to keep my mind off Luca Harlow and his dark eyes and the way his presence had made my Omega instincts go haywire. It almost worked until my phone rang with an unknown number. My hand hovered over the decline button. Ilium's warnings echoed in my head. But curiosity won out over common sense, and I answered. Hello, Oliver. That low, familiar voice made my pulse quicken. Did you get home safely? Yes, I said, trying to sound calm. Your driver was very efficient. Good. I wanted to make sure. There was a pause. Are you free tomorrow evening? Why, I asked suspiciously. Because I'd like to see you again. Properly this time, not in some alley where you're terrified. I wasn't terrified. I lied. He laughed. You were shaking, I could see it even in the dark. That was cold, not fear. Liar, he said, but his tone was almost affectionate. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock, I'll send a car. What if I say no? Then I'll show up at your door instead, and your roommate will probably have a heart attack. I'm guessing he's already told you all about how dangerous I am. How did he know about Ilium? The thought sent chills down my spine. You've been watching me, I accused. Protecting, he corrected. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Then let me explain it to you. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Before I could argue further, he hung up. I stared at my phone, heart racing. Ilium chose that moment to emerge from his room, took one look at my face and groaned. He called, didn't he? He wants to see me tomorrow. Tell me you said no. I couldn't meet his eyes. He didn't really give me a choice. Ilium sat down heavily. Oliver, this is exactly what I was afraid of. Once someone like him decides he wants something, he doesn't stop until he gets it. And right now what he wants is you. Maybe it's not like that, I said weakly. And maybe the sun will rise in the west tomorrow. Ilium shook his head. Just promise me you'll be careful. These alphas, especially the powerful ones, they don't see omegas as people. They see possessions. I'll be careful. I promised. But as I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I wondered if careful was even possible anymore. Luca Harlow had already gotten under my skin, and the terrifying part was that some dark corner of my mind didn't want him to leave. The next evening, I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes trying to decide what to wear. It's not a date. Ilium called from the living room, somehow reading my mind. It's a summons from a crime lord. Wear whatever you'd wear to your own funeral. You're not helping, I called back. I'm not trying to help. I'm trying to talk sense into you. But clearly that ship has sailed. I settled on dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt. Nothing too formal, nothing too casual. When the car arrived at exactly 7, I was ready but not prepared. There's a difference. The driver was different this time, a young man who didn't speak at all during the entire drive. We headed into a part of the city I'd never been to, where the buildings were taller and the lights were brighter. Money lived here, the kind of money that came from sources polite society pretended not to know about. We pulled up to a restaurant that looked like it belonged in a movie, the kind of place where reservations were made months in advance, and the menu didn't list prices because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Luca was waiting outside, leaning against the building's stone facade. He'd traded his suit for dark slacks and a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. Somehow he looked even more dangerous in casual clothes. "You came," he said, pushing off from the wall. "Did I have a choice?" I asked. "Everyone has choices, Oliver. You just made yours." He gestured toward the entrance. "Shall we?" Inside, the hostess greeted Luca by name and led us to a private room in the back. It was intimate, with soft lighting and a single table set for two. The door closed behind us with a quiet click that felt far too final. "This is a lot," I said, taking in the elaborate setup. I wanted privacy. He pulled out a chair for me. "Sit." I sat, mostly because my legs felt unsteady. He took the seat across from me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. "You're nervous," he observed. "You're observant," I countered. "It's kept me alive this long." He poured wine into both our glasses. "Relax, I'm not going to hurt you. That's what people who are about to hurt someone always say." He smiled at that, genuine amusement lighting up his features. "You have a sharp tongue for someone who should probably be more careful." Maybe I'm tired of being careful. It hasn't gotten me very far in life. "Fair enough." He raised his glass. "To honesty then." I clinked my glass against his, taking a small sip. The wine was excellent, smooth and rich in a way that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Dinner arrived in courses. Small, artistic plates that looked too beautiful to eat. But I was hungry, and the food tasted even better than it looked. Throughout the meal, Luca asked me questions about my job, my life, my family. Normal questions that felt abnormal coming from him. "Why do you care?" I finally asked, setting down my fork. "You could have anyone. Why waste time on a nobody delivery driver?" "Because you're not nobody," he said simply. "You walked up to me in the middle of my own territory and asked for help. Do you know how rare that is? How brave or foolish or both? You already established it was foolish. I'm revising my assessment." His gaze was intense, unwavering. "Most people look at me and see a monster. You looked at me and saw a person who might know where Elm Street was. I didn't know who you were." "Exactly." He leaned back in his chair. "You treated me like I was normal, like I was just another person on the street. When was the last time that happened to me? I honestly can't remember." There was something vulnerable in his admission, something that made my chest tighten. "So this is about ego?" I asked. "You're interested because I didn't recognize you?" "No." He shook his head. "I'm interested because when I looked into your eyes I saw something real, something pure. This world I live in, Oliver, it's full of lies and manipulation and people who would sell their own family for the right price. But you're genuine. You don't know me well enough to say that. Then let me get to know you better." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. My omega instincts were screaming at me, torn between the natural pull toward a powerful alpha and the logical understanding that this man was dangerous. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said quietly. "Why not?" "Because my roommate spent an entire evening telling me exactly how terrible an idea getting involved with you would be. Because you're a criminal. Because this whole thing feels like it's moving too fast and I can't think straight when you're near me." "Good," he said. "Good?" I repeated, incredulous. "I don't want you to think straight. I want you to feel." He stood up, moving around the table until he was close enough to touch. "I want you to trust your instincts instead of whatever fear your roommate put in your head. Those fears are legitimate," I argued. But my voice wavered. "Maybe." He reached out, his fingers brushing against my cheek. The touch sent sparks through my entire body. "Or maybe what you should really be afraid of is how much you want this." I couldn't deny it. The pull between us was magnetic, undeniable. My omega biology recognized him as something powerful, something worth submitting to. But my mind, my rational mind, knew this was a cliff I was standing on, and one wrong step would send me tumbling. "I need time," I whispered. "Time for what?" "To think. To figure out if this is real or if I'm just responding to your pheromones." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, I'll give you time. But Oliver?" He tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. "Know this? I'm patient, but I'm also persistent. And when I want something, I don't give up easily." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." The drive home was silent, my head spinning with everything that had happened. Luca had been charming, disarming even. He'd shown me a side of himself that contradicted everything Ilium had warned me about. But that didn't make it less true. When I got back to the apartment, Ilium was waiting up. "Well?" he demanded. I struggled to find words. "Different than I expected." "Different how?" "Human," I admitted. Surprisingly human. Iliam's expression darkened. That's how they get you, Oliver. They show you what you want to see until you're too deep to escape. Maybe he was right. But as I lay in bed that night, all I could think about was the way Luca had looked at me, like I was something precious rather than something to be used. And despite all the warnings, all the logical reasons to run, part of me wanted to see where this dangerous road might lead. The following week I learned that Luca Harlow wasn't just a name. He was an empire. My roommate Iliam, who was a beta and the undisputed gossip king of our apartment, filled me in on every dark detail. We were in the kitchen, me making coffee while he delivered the news in his usual dramatic fashion, gesturing wildly with his hands like he was narrating a thriller. Luca was the underground ruler of the East Side, controlling everything from illegal substances to weapons to information networks. The police feared him, politicians accepted his money and turned blind eyes. And Omegas, they were warned to never get close because in his world, Omegas became slaves, tools, possessions without autonomy. Stay away from him, Oliver, Iliam said seriously, his usual playfulness gone. These kinds of alphas are possessive, violent. They'll claim you and then you'll cease to exist as your own person. You'll just become their property. I didn't respond at the time, but his words circled in my mind like vultures. Still, the truth was I couldn't stay away, because that Friday when I was working my shift at the cafe downtown, two alphas stumbled in, drunk, aggressive, and clearly hunting for trouble. They zeroed in on me immediately. "What a sweet little Omega," one of them said, leaning over the counter to sniff at me like I was an object. "All alone too." "I'm working," I said firmly, gripping my tray and moving toward the counter. "Please leave." "Or what? What are you going to do about it?" the second one mocked. They grabbed my wrist before I could pull away. I tried to jerk free, but they were stronger and my Omega body didn't stand a chance against alpha strength. Fear gripped me tight, and I opened my mouth to scream. The door burst open with such force it slammed against the wall. Luca, his eyes were filled with pure rage, a fury so intense it seemed to darken the entire room. He crossed the distance to me in rapid strides, shoving the two alphas aside like they were nothing more than garbage, and positioned himself between us in a protective stance that left no room for argument. "You put your hands on him?" Luca's voice was dangerously low, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. From behind his back, I could see the two alphas had gone pale with fear. "We didn't know he was yours. Now you do." Luca grabbed them both by their collars and physically threw them out the door like they weighed nothing. Then he turned to me, cupping my face in his hands. "Are you all right?" I couldn't move. I could only stare into his eyes, where anger still burned but concern for me shone through even brighter. "I'm fine," I whispered. "No, you're not," he said, studying my face carefully. "You're trembling." Then he did something I never expected. He pulled me into an embrace. It was protective, warm, safe. My Omega instincts melted completely. I wanted to freeze this moment forever. His scent calmed me. His closeness made me feel secure in a way nothing else ever had. "You need to stay with me now," Luca murmured near my ear. "I can't leave you unprotected. Do you understand?" This time I didn't argue. I nodded slightly because the truth was I didn't want him to leave me alone either. As we left the cafe, Luca held my hand, and for the first time I thought maybe being under his protection wasn't such a terrible thing after all. The cafe owner had witnessed everything but said nothing, just gave me a knowing look as we walked out. The other customers had scattered, leaving overturned chairs and abandoned coffees in their wake. Outside, Luca's car was waiting, engine running, as if he'd arrived in such a hurry he hadn't even bothered to park properly. "Get in," he said, opening the passenger door for me. I slid into the seat, still shaking despite my best efforts to appear calm. Luca got in beside me and just sat there for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "How did you know I was in trouble?" I asked quietly. "I have people watching the places you frequent," he admitted without shame. "For exactly this reason. That's invasive. That's necessary." He finally looked at me. "Do you think those two were random drunks? They were sent to test whether you were really under my protection. Someone wanted to know if I'd respond." The implications of that made my blood run cold. "So this is my life now? Being bait in whatever power games you're playing?" "No." His voice was firm. "This is me ensuring you never have to be afraid again. There's a difference." He drove us to a building I didn't recognize, an upscale apartment complex with security that made Fort Knox look accessible. His penthouse was on the top floor, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. "You'll stay here," he said, leading me inside. "The guest room is yours. Anything you need, just ask. I have a job, an apartment, a life, which you can return to once I've eliminated the threat." He turned to face me fully. "Oliver, someone knows about you now. They'll use you to get to me. Until I handle this, you're safer here." I wanted to argue, to insist on my independence, but the fear still coursing through me from the cafe incident made the words die in my throat. Besides, part of me, the Omega part I'd always tried to suppress, wanted to stay, wanted his protection, wanted him. "Just for a few days," I finally agreed. "Just for a few days," he echoed, though we both knew it was a lie. That night, lying in the guest room that was bigger than my entire apartment, I stared at the ceiling and wondered what I'd gotten myself into. Down the hall, I could hear Luca moving around, making phone calls in a language I didn't recognize. His world was so different from mine, so dangerous and complicated. But when I finally fell asleep, it was his scent lingering in the air that made me feel safe enough to close my eyes. The next morning, I woke to find breakfast already prepared in the kitchen. Fresh pastries, fruit, coffee. Luca was nowhere to be seen, but a note sat beside the plate. "Had to handle some business. Make yourself at home. Back by evening." I spent the day exploring the penthouse, feeling like an intruder in someone else's life. Every surface was pristine, every piece of furniture carefully chosen. There were no personal photos, no signs of family or friends, just expensive emptiness. When Luca returned that evening, he found me on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life below. "Beautiful view," I said, without turning around. "Yes," he agreed, but when I glanced at him, he was looking at me, not the skyline. My heart skipped a beat at the intensity in his gaze. This was more than protection, more than duty. This was something neither of us had planned for, and it terrified me as much as it thrilled me. "Dinner?" he offered, extending his hand. I took it, and as his fingers closed around mine, I realized I was already in too deep to turn back. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. Whether that was incredibly stupid or incredibly brave, I hadn't decided yet. Living with Luca was strange. Not frightening, but surprisingly comfortable. His penthouse downtown was sleek and modern, all clean lines and expensive taste. He'd given me the guest room, which was spacious and more comfortable than anywhere I'd ever lived. But what struck me most was how attentive he was, constantly checking whether I was safe, whether I needed anything, whether I was settling in okay. He was a mixture of dominance and care that was both confusing and addictive. The first few days I felt awkward, like I was playing house in someone else's life. But slowly I began to relax. Mornings we'd drink coffee together, evenings he'd return from whatever business he conducted and invite me to dinner. One night we were both on the balcony. Luca was drinking whiskey while I nursed my coffee. The city lights glittered below us, and the air was cool against my skin. "Why me?" I finally gathered the courage to ask. "You're so powerful. You could have any Omega you wanted, so why choose me?" Luca set down his glass and looked at me. For several seconds he was silent, as if considering how to explain something complex. "Because you're the first Omega who wasn't afraid of me. When you asked for directions that night, you looked at me like I was just another person on the street. There was trust in your eyes, innocence. I live in a world where nobody trusts anyone. Everyone either fears me or wants to use me, but you were different." His honesty caught me off guard. "But I'm not part of your world," I said. "I'm ordinary, Oliver." He stepped closer. "Ordinary people don't survive when they're thrust into my world. But you have. You've challenged me. You've made me feel human." My breath caught in my throat. "I didn't want to fall for you," he confessed, his voice carrying a vulnerability I'd never heard before. "But I have, and this is the first time I've ever felt this way." I was about to respond, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted immediately. The tension was obvious. He answered, saying only yes and understood before hanging up. "What's wrong?" I asked with concern. "Rival gang," he said, setting his glass aside. "They've heard I have an Omega. Your name has been leaked." My blood turned to ice. Suddenly everything became terrifyingly real. This wasn't just our story anymore. It was his world closing in around me. "They're coming for you," Luca said. "To hurt me through you." In that moment I understood that loving Luca Harlow came with a price. But when he gripped my hand tightly, as if he'd never let me go, I thought maybe I was willing to pay it. The rest of that evening passed in tense preparation. Luca made call after call, his voice cold and commanding as he issued orders I couldn't fully understand. I sat on the couch, watching him transform from the man who'd shared vulnerable confessions with me into the crime lord everyone feared. It was jarring, seeing both sides of him so clearly. Pack a bag, he told me around midnight. Just essentials. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't think to look. His jaw was tight with stress. I need you away from here while I deal with this. Deal with it how? I demanded, standing up. Luca, what are you planning to do? Whatever is necessary. He cupped my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. I will not let anyone hurt you. Do you understand? I don't care what it costs. What if it costs your life? The question came out as barely a whisper. Then it costs my life. He said it so simply, like his own survival was negotiable. You're worth more than that. I wanted to argue, to tell him that wasn't true, that he couldn't throw himself into danger for me. But the look in his eyes stopped me. This wasn't up for debate. He'd already made his decision. We left within the hour, driving through empty streets to a location he wouldn't name. The safe house turned out to be a modest home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the last place anyone would look for Luca Harlow's Omega. He settled me inside, checking every window and door twice before he seemed satisfied. Then he turned to me, and I saw something in his expression that terrified me more than any threat from rival gangs. I have to go, he said. I know, I'll come back, promise me. I grabbed his jacket, holding on like I could keep him there through sheer will. Promise me you'll come back. I promise. He kissed my forehead, gentle and sweet. Wait for me. Then he was gone, and I was alone with bodyguards who wouldn't meet my eyes, and a silence that pressed down on me like a physical weight. I tried to distract myself, reading, watching television, anything to keep from thinking about what Luca was walking into. But every car that passed made my heart jump. Every sound made me hope it was him returning. Hours bled into each other. Day turned to night, turned to day again. The bodyguards changed shifts but said nothing, their faces professionally blank. I asked for updates and got polite deflections. I begged for information and received sympathetic silence. By the third day, I was climbing the walls with anxiety. My Omega instincts screamed that something was wrong, that my Alpha was in danger. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep properly. I just paced and worried and imagined every terrible outcome. On the fourth night, near midnight, I heard a car pull up outside. The front door opened and my heart stopped. Luca stood in the doorway, but not the Luca I knew. This version was bleeding from multiple wounds, his shirt torn and stained dark with blood. His face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut. He could barely stand. Luca! I rushed to him, my hands hovering over his injuries, afraid to touch him for fear of causing more pain. Oh my God, you're hurt. I'm fine, he said. But his voice was weak and his knees buckled. I caught him, supporting his weight as best I could, and helped him to the couch. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the first aid kit, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall yet. Blood, cuts, bruises, seeing him like this broke something inside me. Why did you risk everything? I asked, my voice cracking. Why would you do this? He caught my hand, gripping it with what strength he had left. Because you're my life, Oliver. If something happened to you, winning wouldn't mean anything. I couldn't survive without you. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. I love you, I said clearly, the words finally breaking free. I don't care about your world or your enemies or any of it. I just want you. Luca pulled me closer despite his injuries and kissed me. It was slow and deep and full of promises neither of us had spoken aloud yet. My first kiss with him, and it contained everything: love, pain, hope, desperation. When we finally broke apart, I was crying in earnest, all the fear and tension of the past days pouring out. Then stay with me, he whispered, pressing his forehead against mine. Always, always, I repeated without hesitation. That night changed everything. I wasn't just Oliver anymore. I was Luca Harlow's Omega, his weakness and his strength, his reason for fighting and his reason for living. And I would protect this relationship with everything I had, no matter what the world threw at us. I spent the next hour carefully cleaning his wounds. He winced but didn't complain, watching me work with an expression I couldn't quite read. Some cuts were deep enough to need stitches, and I did my best with the supplies in the first aid kit, my hands steadier now that I had a task to focus on. You're good at this, he observed. I had a phase where I wanted to be a nurse, I admitted, applying antibiotic ointment to a gash on his shoulder. before I realized I couldn't afford medical school and settled for whatever jobs would pay rent. You could go back to school, he said. I could. Don't. I cut him off gently. Don't try to fix my life with money. That's not why I'm here. Why are you here? He asked. I met his eyes, those dark eyes that had terrified me that first night, and now made me feel safer than anything else in the world. Because somewhere between asking for directions and falling in love with you, this became where I belong. His good hand cupped my cheek. I don't deserve you. Probably not, I agreed, making him laugh despite the pain it caused. But you're stuck with me anyway. Over the next few days, I took care of him while he recovered. The bodyguards maintained their watch, but the tension had eased. Whatever Luca had done, whoever he'd fought, the immediate threat had been neutralized. He didn't give me details, and I didn't ask. Some parts of his world I didn't need to know about. What I did need was this: the quiet mornings where I brought him coffee in bed, the evenings where we sat together on the couch, and he told me stories about growing up in a world so different from mine. He talked about his father who'd built the empire Luca now controlled, about the brother he'd lost to a rival gang when they were teenagers, about the loneliness of being feared by everyone around you. I never had anyone I could just talk to, he admitted one night. Everyone wants something. Everyone has an agenda. What do you think I want? I asked curiously. At first I thought you'd want money or protection or status. He played with my fingers absently. But you turned down every expensive gift I tried to give you. You won't let me pay for things. You insist on doing your own laundry, even though I have people for that. Because I'm not here for any of that, I said simply. I'm here because when I'm with you, I feel complete. Like I found a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. He pulled me closer, careful of his healing ribs. That's exactly how I feel. A week after the attack, Luca was healed enough to return to his regular activities. He'd been making calls from the safe house, but now he needed to be physically present for meetings and operations. I expected him to send me back to my apartment, to return to our separate lives now that the danger had passed. Instead, he asked me to move into the penthouse permanently. I know it's fast, he said when I stared at him in shock. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I can't imagine waking up and you not being there. I don't want to. What about my job? My apartment? Ilium? Keep your job if it makes you happy. We'll cover your half of the rent so Ilium doesn't suffer. But please, Oliver, say you'll stay. I thought about my tiny apartment with its leaky faucet and thin walls. I thought about my minimum wage job and the constant struggle to make ends meet. But mostly I thought about how I felt when I was with Luca, seen, valued, protected, loved. Okay, I said, I'll stay. The smile that lit up his face was worth every risk, every danger, every complication that came with loving him. Moving my belongings took one afternoon. I didn't have much, and what I did have looked shabby and out of place in the penthouse's sleek luxury. But Luca insisted we keep my favorite items: the worn armchair I'd rescued from a thrift store, the mismatched mugs I'd collected over years, the photos of my family I kept in cheap frames. This is your home now, he said. It should have pieces of you in it. Ilium took the news better than I expected. I knew you were gone the moment he showed up at the cafe, he said, helping me pack. Just promise me you'll be happy and safe. I promise, I told him. He's not what people think. He's more than that. He better be, Ilium warned. Because if he hurts you, Beta or not, I'll find a way to make him pay. I hugged him tight. I'll miss having you as a roommate. You better visit, he said, and call me. I want all the gossip about life with a crime lord. That first night in the penthouse as a permanent resident felt surreal. Luca cooked dinner, an actual home-cooked meal that surprised me with how good it was. What? He asked when he caught me staring. You thought I couldn't cook? I thought you had people for that. I teased. I do, but I wanted tonight to be just us. After dinner we stood on the balcony together, looking out at the city that had brought us together in the most unexpected way. Luca wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I leaned into his warmth. Do you regret it? He asked quietly, asking me for directions that night. I turned in his arms to face him. Not for a second. That wrong turn was the best mistake I ever made. He kissed me then, soft and sweet, and full of all the tomorrows we'd have together. And I knew, standing there in his arms with the city lights glittering below us, that I'd found my home. Not in a place but in a person. The stranger I'd asked for directions had become my whole world. And I wouldn't have it any other way.